Welcome to the Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks. Stephen is out this week, as you probably know. Last Friday, they aired the podcastathon, so Stephen spent the whole week prepping for that. So it's just me. But when I heard I was going to be alone, I thought, who's the person I would like to talk to? Well, of course, it's William Gallagher. Welcome back to the show, William.
That's so nice. Thank you for having me. Except, I've got to say, this is just all wrong. Mac Power Users. It's David and Stephen talking and then me going off to spend money. That's how it's supposed to be.
Well, today you're on the other side of the equation, I suspect.
Right. What can I get you to buy?
Yeah.
I'll work on that. Okay.
All right. Well, William, we're going to get into to you. You've been on the show once before, but I think a lot of folks probably are not familiar with you. But we have lots to share, and we're going to talk about them. And before we do so, however, it is September, and I just wanted to mention that it is Relay for St. Jude month. You know, everybody's been putting money into St. Jude. We really appreciate it. It's Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Podcastathon just happened, and more than ever, we're looking for help from folks to help support St. Jude. One of the most important parts of being a patient at St. Jude is having space to not be a patient and just be a kid. Last year, St. Jude opened up the Family Commons, which is a 45,000 square foot space just for families. It's a treatment and clinical staff-free floor, a place where families can rest and reconnect between appointments. It's also a kind of town hall where families gather to get a coffee and kids can be creative in an on-site recording studio, art room, and makerspace, which has tools and technology like a 3D printer for hands-on learning and inventing. You know, these kids are going through a lot. They're dealing with cancer. The parents are worried. And St. Jude made this beautiful space for them to kind of just be kids and families together. And that's just one more reason to love St. Jude. You know, imagine yourself in that position. I hate to even say that, but your child has cancer. You don't know what to do. You get a hold of St. Jude. They say, come here. We're going to house you. We're going to take care of your child. We're going to let you be a family, and we're going to beat this cancer together. And that's what they do. It's so easy to donate money to them because you know it's going to such a good cause. We do a big thing in our house. We save money for it every year. I heard from somebody saying, hey, I heard the St. Jude ad. I get it, but, you know, I'm a college student. I just can't afford it right now. And my response would be, you know what? I bet you could afford $5, and that's okay. Yeah, you don't have to make a massive contribution to make a difference. If everybody in this audience would contribute $5, it would make an incredible difference at St. Jude. So don't feel bad if you're not in a position to give a bunch of money, but even just $1, $5, $10, that makes a massive difference as we put everybody together. You can go to stjude.org/relay today and make a donation. And I'll tell you what, not only will you make a difference, it feels great. So please go check it out. Make the day for somebody else today and make the day for yourself. stjude.org/relay. All right, gang. So in addition to helping out St. Jude, I wanted to mention for more power users today, now that we've got William Gallagher here, the famous writer, the man who wrote for Doctor Who, we're going to be talking about AI and creative writing in more power users today. That's the ad-free extended version of the show, which you can sign up for over at relay.fm/MPU. William, tell us about yourself a little bit for folks who aren't familiar.
That small question. I was trying to work out what I've done since I last came on. Basically, I recovered since the last time I was on. I think the thing that's really important to me at the moment is that as we record this, I've just been reappointed Deputy Chair of the Writers Guild of Great Britain, which actually may play into the business about AI and writing, because there's some things going on with the industry of writing that I don't think writers tend to even realize can be going on. That's actually the only bit that worries me about AI. The rest of it, I feel, will kind of work itself out in the wash. But there's some contractual shenanigans that really bother me. And I think the writers' guilds all around the world are deeply important at the moment. So the fact that I get to, stand with those people, I aspired to be in the guild as a member, and now I'm an officer, and it's deeply important to me. But I also do, I remember saying to somebody recently that if I was a PC user, I don't think I'd be able to do all the stuff I do, because I never have to think about the tools. I just switch to Pages to write books, Final Draft to scripts, producing podcasts, recording videos and
Yeah.
things. It all feels like the Mac ecosystem was built just for me, really. And I try to exploit it fully.
I think that is a thing because, people using PCs, and maybe it's not as true now, but my limited experience with PCs lately says it still is true. There is a lot of work done to maintain the system.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like Apple has created a creative tool that kind of gets out of your way. I mean, part of it is the general operating system is so stable in the way they've set it up, but also part of it is this third-party ecosystem of great app developers. But for creative work, a Mac is a great tool to actually just do the work.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's an issue of where there's a line somewhere, because it seems to me that Apple puts us first. So Windows deigns to allow you to use its software, and if it wants to update Windows, it's going to, even in the middle of it. I was in a Writers Guild finance meeting, and the main guy doing it, 3 hours, his PC was out of action while it just happily updated.
Yeah.
But that never happens to us. But then equally, I have friends who really dislike Pages, for example, because they say it can't do half the things Word does. And that's because Word is in your face. Look at me, all these tools. And Pages lets you get on with it until you need it. And so sometimes I think we don't appreciate what's where with this. So I don't know where the line is, but I like where Apple has put it. So
yeah. Well, a little bit about William is you're a writer. In addition to being the chair of the Writers Guild of Great Britain, you've written for, I believe, stage and television. Yes. I don't know if have you done any motion pictures?
I have one credit on one short film, and I'm actually obsessed with dialogue, and it kills me that this one short film, the scene I wrote was wordless, and it had to be. That was the idea, but no, I have literally no words on film, and I was fired off a TV show. So thanks for bringing that one.
Okay.
Back up.
Well, sorry about that.
Also, I was fired in the dullest way. I was fired over the phone, and a friend was in a story meeting at ITV for it. He popped out to the gents. Producer came in after him and said, "Don't come back." That's how you should be fired off a TV show, isn't it? That's much better.
Yeah, you'd think, right? I mean,
exactly. You want drama in drama, I think.
Yeah. I once heard a story from Mel Brooks talking about dealing with executives in the entertainment industry. And, Mel Brooks, famous director and writer and just comedian. And his thing was he would always tell them whatever they wanted to hear and then do whatever he wanted. And the story I heard it in context to was there's a great movie called Blazing Saddles. It's actually the last movie my father and I ever watched together. Week he was sick, he wanted to watch Blazing Saddles, so I went over and watched it with him. But he had cast Gene Wilder as the cowboy with the quick draw cowboy. I forget his name, and one of the executives says, "You can't use Gene Wilder. He doesn't look like a cowboy. You need to fire him." And Mel Brooks says, "You're right. I'm going to fire him tomorrow." And then of course he didn't. And then
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Then later they asked him, "Well, weren't you going to fire him?" He says, "Well, we got too far. It's too late now. We got to just use him."
Oh, that is smart.
He's a very clever guy. Yeah. But you pay for your shoes writing scripts for various entertainment enterprises. You also are involved with tech. You've got a great YouTube channel called 58 Keys where you wax poetic about some of your favorite apps and workflows. I think that's great. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. You work with Apple Insider too, right?
Yes, I write on Apple Insider, and just recently, gosh, a year now, I think, I've been producing their podcast and things, obviously modeled on yours quite clearly. And that's maybe I'm doing more and more Apple Insider stuff with them, and they're a fun bunch to be with. Plus, of course, it's an excuse. It's because of Apple Insider that I told myself, yes, I can buy myself an iPhone 16 Pro Max this year. It's, it's for work.
Yeah, for the job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the Fraternal Order of Podcast Enablers.
Yes. The other day, I mistyped podcasts as podcats, and I thought, "Oh, what a name! We're podcats."
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. Okay, maybe that's just a British thing, but I felt quite cool for a second. I don't anymore, to be fair. But okay.
Yeah, I think if you were going to be podcats, you'd need to get like a cool mustache, dress in all black, and some sunglasses. Then you could be a
I
podcat.
could work that. I
Yeah,
could do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of spending money on Apple devices, this show will drop just a few days after everybody gets their new iPhones. You just admitted you're getting one. What are
Yes.
you most excited about with the new iPhone?
I'm really unsure. I almost didn't get anything this year, but apart from the new features in it and the promise of Apple Intelligence, for some reason, I've been just on the road towards wanting to get a bigger phone than I had before. So I'm going from the iPhone 15 Pro to the 16 Pro Max. So even though you can well argue there isn't a gigantic difference between the years, there will be for me going to the other size. So that's what drew me in. And then the promise of the desert titanium color, really. How trivial is that? I was very tempted by that.
Yeah.
And the bits of Apple Intelligence that we can see so far, because remember, I'm in the UK, so I'm getting it, or even later than anybody in the US for it. The bits I can see, some of it I really like, and the idea of that getting better and better, and being kind of steeped into everything rather than this separate app you go off to run. That's appealing to me. And I felt like the 15 Pro could handle it, but the 16 Pro Max will obviously do it better. And yeah, I just fancied it. That's it, really. Do you have a more sensible reason for being excited, a more particular?
No,
Are
not
you a processor guy?
not particularly. I get a new one every year. The kids get the hand-me-down, so they are very motivated for
All
me to get a
right.
new one.
Yes.
So that's a little thing. If you want a good system, I'm just telling everybody out there, give the old one to your children, and then they will be your enablers for you. I get the new one every year, but then they kind of cycle through the family. I would say though, that question of going from the smaller to the bigger screen, I think having now talked to a lot of listeners and readers over the years, I think the real gating issue is whether or not you want to use the phone one-handed. I think if you're somebody who really wants to be able to pull out of your pocket and do whatever you want with one hand, if that's important to you, then don't get the big one. If that's not important to you, you'll probably like the big one. And like for me, I don't really care. I can use a phone two-handed. It doesn't matter. I don't do enough on the phone that the times I need it to stop and just use two hands is I'm completely okay with that. And I do like the bigger screen. I like the extra text. My 50-some-year-old eyes like bigger text. And so I'm in with the big one, even though it's even bigger this year. So you have to let me know how that works out for you.
I'm genuinely unsure about it, but I feel like I've been kind of trained towards it because I used to put my phone in my top shirt pocket, but then around the 11 or 12, they just started being slightly too heavy for that and slightly too tall. So I've got this habit now of practically holstering them in a certain pocket on my trousers and stuff. And I realized there's not much difference in how much room the one will take. So that helped. But I don't know. I'm really unsure. I did have an iPhone, blanking now. Would it have been an XR that was a larger one? I had that however many years ago that was. And I really liked it. But then I got the smaller size the next year and I preferred it. So I could be making a terrible mistake.
I think you'll be quite happy with it. And I'm glad you're getting some new hardware. What about your Mac? I know as a writer, you do a lot of work with your Mac. What's your current hardware stack?
I have two Macs. They're both M1s. I have a Mac Mini in my office with an enormous screen, like 49 inches. My morning exercise is walking from one side to the other of it. And then I have, I think my favorite Mac ever, a 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is, again, it's M1, but it has started to creak slightly. I'm a little disappointed to say. Just a couple of times now, in Final Cut Pro, and when I'm very low on space, it crawls a little bit. So maybe that's Apple telling me to get an M4 when they come out. But at the moment, those are the two main machines. Plus, I have an iPad Pro that I write on a lot as well.
So is the when you say space, is it like storage space or is it?
Storage space,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I go for as much internal storage as I can because I, bad experiences over the years when I had just too little. But you know what Apple does with prices for storage; it's really hard. So I got a 2 terabyte drive, and I have filled it. Bad disorganization. Like there's good disorganization,
yeah.
bad organization. That's the phrase. So I know it's down to me, and every now and again I clear things out. I should sit down properly and work it out what I
Yeah,
need.
you may want to look at something like ChronoSync, which is a great little app to kind of remove data and get data onto a backup drive because really
All right.
that storage question is the one that when I hear from people that need to upgrade, it's almost never that, oh, this thing is too slow for the work I'm giving it. It's almost always I just need more storage. And in the age of Apple Silicon, I think those like that M1 is going to be an effective computer for at least another 5 years. And if you
Don't
just have
say
enough
that.
storage, yeah.
Stop. I want to buy an M4. Don't do that to
Okay.
me.
Well, you know what? That M1 is just a piece of junk. You should just get rid of
Yes,
it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for folks who want to save a few bucks, it really is worth it, I think, to invest in the extra storage because that is so often the reason people feel compelled to upgrade. It's not that the thing is too slow; it's the thing doesn't have enough storage, and just buy extra storage. And I know it hurts. I think it's kind of ridiculous how much Apple charges for the storage, but it really does mean that the device is probably going to get several more years of active life from it. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I used to have this thing where I would go for a slightly slower processor and spend the money on storage and RAM. And since Apple Silicon, I'm not sure whether I need to do with the RAM or not. Because so far I've had no problems.
Yeah.
And of course I've blanked on how much, but I haven't bought much RAM for it.
Well, I mean, in the old days, you could always upgrade the hard drive yourself, right? It wasn't that big of
True.
a deal to crack it open and put a bigger drive in. But now it's like you're stuck. So
Yeah.
I think you're really on the right track with leaning towards additional storage. I was thinking about before we started the show. I've never heard you talk or write much about iPad. Are you an iPad guy?
Yeah, I am now. I actually just in the last few years I've gone through an iPad renaissance. I
Okay.
think it would have been. It was actually just before I got the MacBook Pro. I bought an 11-inch iPad Pro M1. Again, I seem to be fixated on M1, and I remember being glad I'd done it that way around because if I'd bought the MacBook Pro first, I couldn't. I don't think I could have justified to myself getting the iPad.
Yeah.
But I also think I made a bad mistake in that I got the Magic Keyboard, which I do think is excellent, but it meant I was treating the iPad as another laptop. And just recently, actually, when Apple last announced new iPads, I found I really fancied them. And I'm thinking, but why do I when I don't use it much? So I got it out. I was looking at it, and for some reason, who knows why, I took it out of the Magic Keyboard and I was reading more on it. And in fact, actually, do you know, I think this might be your fault. I seem to remember you saying somewhere, treat an iPad as an iPad, not as a mini Mac or
Yeah.
something. And I am so taken with that now. I cherish my little iPad.
Yeah.
Not enough to buy the new ones, but I'm really, really getting into my old one. Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, I mean, an M1 iPad is going to run forever. And I do think there is something to that. So many of us are trying to turn it into a Mac and
Mm.
it just sitting in so much friction. Whereas if you treat it like the iPad that Apple advertises it as, and if that's something you've got a space for, it's a much more enjoyable experience. Well, you're set now. You've got a new iPhone coming. You're gonna
Yeah,
apparently be updating your MacBook Pro very shortly.
possibly.
Now that you've said it
Possibly.
publicly. Although
Oh, right. Then I'm committed to it. Good point.
there is a credible
Okay.
rumor that the M5 is going to have that OLED screen. So that
Right.
might be a reason to wait, but that'd be probably another
Okay.
couple of years. So I don't know if you want to wait that long.
Well, I hear the M6 is going to be just,
Yeah, I know. Isn't that
great.
always the case, right? But if you wait for the
Yes.
M7, then that'll be probably 20%
Exactly.
faster. Yeah, I know. I hate to say that stuff because it's so true. It's always going to be better. But OLED screens, I think, are going to be really fun when they get those into a MacBook Pro.
I've still not really had enough time with them. I mean, I went into an Apple store to look at the new iPads, particularly the iPad Pro, and was just blown away by the lightness
Yeah.
of it. And I did think the screen was very nice, but I didn't bring my own iPad with me to compare. And even in the Apple Store lights, there's this gorgeous Apple Store in Birmingham. It's like 100-year-old building. Used to be a bank, used to be a bookstore, and now it's just beautiful architecture, but it's very bright. So having the iPad Air and the iPad Pro next to it, I wasn't really seeing a lot of difference under those conditions. So do you think I should just buy an OLED iPad purely to see what it's like and then hand it back? No.
Well, I think that the screen stuff is easy to get wrapped up in, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not discriminating enough to notice.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because yeah, promotion on the iPhones. I have friends who rave about this, and I understand it. I believe I understand why, but I can't see it. The screen looks great, but I couldn't tell you if promotion was on or off, and I just feel I'm blind to it in some way. Maybe my eyes are getting old. But
Well, I mean, I guess, and if you accept that about yourself, it makes it easier to make some of those decisions, right? Like
good
I
point. Yeah.
I really don't like. I did get the new iPad this year. But my other one was 6 years old and still working fine, but I went ahead and updated it. And honestly, I don't really watch much media on it. So even though I got this fancy screen, I don't watch a lot of movies on it. So I'm not sure I'm getting the benefit of the screen, but it is nice having a new iPad with a new battery and
Yeah.
faster processor and all that stuff. But
I actually subscribed to Final Cut Pro. I remember I was on holiday when it came out last year, and I was so excited. The moment I got back on my own Wi-Fi, I downloaded it instantly and thought, well, this is very clever, but it's missing that. It doesn't do this. And I ignored it after the trial. But then when I had my iPad Renaissance, couldn't resist. I tried it
yeah,
again. I signed up for the year, and I adore video editing on the iPad.
I do think that experiment you did, though, is useful. If you're back at home listening to the show and you've got an iPad in a drawer with a keyboard attached and you feel like you don't use it that often, try to take the keyboard off and put it somewhere inconvenient.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and then just use it as an iPad. What I actually do is I have a keyboard for my iPad, but I keep it in my like away bag, like the bag I take when I go out of town for a day or two. And then I can bring an iPad and I can type into it if I need to. But all the rest of the time, there's no keyboard attached to it. And I find that I use it differently because of that.
Okay, talking about using it differently though, I find that I use and prefer to use it in portrait where I have the impression Apple thinks you should use it landscape. Are you a portrait or a landscape kind of guy?
Without a keyboard, primarily
Mhm.
portrait, you know?
Oh, right. See, it's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But reading books on that screen is just great.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And then like there's all these devices out now. It comes up on the show once in a while. These e-ink tablet devices. And
Yeah.
there's some Android ones. There's the Remarkable. And all these people are buying these devices. And honestly, I just use an iPad for this stuff. So I don't really find myself that attracted to it.
Actually, right in front of me at this moment, I can't tell you the name of it, but I'm reviewing an e-ink reader. And once you get to the book, it is excellent. So no distractions, very crisp e-inked text,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But it's an Android tablet. So it takes, I timed it, it's just under a minute from start to when you can read a book. And unlike Kindle, for example, which is reasonably good at just kind of saying semi-awake, this, after about 10 minutes of don't use, it switches off completely. So every time you pick it up to just read a paragraph while the kettle's boiling, it's a minute before you can get into the book.
Yeah.
And then because it's Android, the Kindle app on it crashes and stuff. So I'm very conflicted because it's a really nice device and the reading experience is excellent, but it's a royal pain waiting for it. Where's the iPad? There it is. And it looks so good. Yeah.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. Go to onepassword.com/MPU for 20% off your plan and get 1Password, which is so much more than a password manager. Security is essential these days. We work with the internet. There's lots of people out there trying to break in and get our data. You need a team of professionals at your back, and that is the team at 1Password, where you get security and productivity wrapped into one. With 1Password, you can secure every sign-in, store all sign-ins in a secure vault with the ability to securely share passwords, secrets, and more. Whether you're at home or at the workplace, sharing passwords is difficult, and if you don't do it right, you're putting yourself at risk. 1Password makes this dead simple. And 1Password can work with every application. You can manage access to every application and web account for every member of your account, whether it's your kids or your employees. And finally, it works from any device. You can sign in to everything from any device and manage permissions to ensure only healthy devices are allowed access. 150,000 businesses trust 1Password, and that's for good reason. It was a company built from the ground up with no purpose except to protect your privacy. They've got accounts for individuals, families, and companies, so no matter what level you're at, 1Password has a product for you. Enterprise password management, they've got that. Enterprise access management, they've got that too. But they also have personal password management and family password management. They're top notch in every category, and I'm super happy to be a customer. The Sparks family has 1Password at its back. You should too. To learn more, head over to onepassword.com/MPU. Once again, onepassword.com/MPU to get yourself 20% off your plan. And thank you, 1Password, for all of your support of the Mac Power users. So, William, you pay for your shoes writing. We were talking about that earlier. So tell us about a few of your workflows that you use to get that done. It's not easy sitting down looking at that blinking cursor every day, I bet.
I find that it is, actually. I don't know. I mean, I love it so much. I don't think, I don't believe in luck. I don't think I'm lucky to do the work I do, but I think I'm fortunate. If that, I mean, very fine distinction there. Everything I've ever really wanted to do, I am now doing pretty much. I mean, there's always something more, and you need there to be something more. But I get to spend all day thinking through the keyboards. And one thing I cannot fathom out is, so this morning, I was writing a 58 key script in Omni Outliner. I then was proofreading some text in Affinity Publisher for the National Association of Writers in Education, where I do the magazine. And then I was finishing off a script in Final Draft. And then I started doing stuff for Apple Insider in Drafts 5. And somewhere along the way in the Apple Insider stuff, I needed to use Pages to try out something. I love that these tools are right there, but I cannot fathom why I go for which. Final Draft's obvious because that's a script.
Yeah.
But why do I write a novel in Scrivener instead of Pages?
Yeah.
Why do I pick up Pages instead of that? We have too many tools, but they're all great. And I'm surprised to say I don't find them distracting. I just automatically go to what, for some reason, feels like the right one. And then I stay in that until the thing is done when I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're technically inclined, so it's not hard for you to switch horses, I'm sure. But something that occurs to me fairly recently, I've been thinking about this a lot, is for the longest time, like for whatever category of productivity tool you picked, writing, task management, whatever, there was really only one or two acceptable options. Like I remember, 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of real garbage applications, a couple good ones. And especially as the cloud sync and stuff came into vogue, there weren't many apps that could like do what you needed them to do and be reliable. And I feel like at some point we crossed a threshold. And I think part of it is the API development that Apple did and the cloud services that they built into the developer tools. But now we're getting remarkable applications from small developers. We did an episode a couple months ago on NotePlan, and I keep hearing from listeners that are really now digging NotePlan. That's made by one guy, right? But he's taken advantage of the Apple APIs, and NotePlan is one of many applications that does what it does very competently. And we don't live in a world anymore where there's only one or two acceptable apps. There are a lot of great apps, no matter what you want to do. So it makes total sense to me that you have kind of different tools for different jobs.
You say this, and I've realized, as you were saying it, I realized I see developers as writers. This is one person crafting something, and it goes out and gets enjoyed by audiences. everywhere. And that's got to be celebrated. That's got to be great. The individual creator making a difference. It's wonderful. But then it's fragile as well. You have things like what happened with Bartender
Yeah.
recently, one person, and it's probably fine, isn't it? Maybe, but we don't know. And I'm still looking around for alternatives to Bartender because of it. So do we want only individuals? Do we want big companies? There's got to be a mix. But I like the fact that now you get a range of it. Because I mean, I remember further back than you, I was so excited one day. WordPerfect Corporation sent me a pallet of copies of their software. So for I don't think the Mac one was quite out yet, but there would have been PC, there was DR DOS as well as MS DOS. There was Unix. There were like 5 different versions, and they all came in this enormous box each. And I had a ridiculously good time reading the manuals for all of them. Who reads manuals? Well, are there manuals anymore? But I mean, I adored WordPerfect at the time, and I really disliked Word for it. But those were the only 2, so you had to like one or either of them. And now there are all of these flavors of things. I mean, as a writer, you have to remember that editors and producers aren't as flexible as us. You can't send a Scrivener document to a publisher. I talked to one publisher who practically raged at the fact that people ever send her Pages documents. And I looked at it and I thought, all you have to do is say to them, please resend it as Word. There was no need for this really over-the-top anger that was coming from it. So in the end, I didn't work with her on something because I thought, we're not going to get along on this. But still, whenever I send to a publisher, I will send in Word format. The onus is on us rather than the publisher, I think. But as long as we know that, we can use whatever tools we like.
Yeah, but because of the power of these tools now, you could write it in Pages or Scrivener, and the editor still at the end of the day gets a Word file because both of those apps give you a very easy way to convert it into Word, and then they're none the wiser, right? And that allows you to use the tool as you're doing the work. But I'm curious, since you do use different ones, what are the relative benefits in your mind? Like, what is it about Scrivener that makes you go to that tool versus Pages?
Scrivener has this gorgeous thing of letting you store all your research right there in the document. So whatever machine you're on, you open it up, and there is the PDF from some book you were reading to it. There's the transcript of an interview you did. There are all the links. And there also is all of your text and previous drafts if you want. I've been through a bad habit recently of throwing away words. I worked out since COVID, I've actually thrown away 250,000 words of novels on account of them being just rubbish. But, you don't really throw things away. You kind of, in Scrivener, you just bung them in a rubbish folder down the bottom. And it's there if you've ever got the nerve to read it again. And you can just carry on with what you like. And then within what you like, I had this problem once. I did a 150,000 word book about a TV show called Blake 7. It never got published. There were sudden rights issues right as I finished, right as I delivered. Very upsetting, that. But I had to interview 40 people, and their availability was crazy. So there was one person in particular I really wanted. I actually blanked on who it was now, which actor, but I couldn't get him until quite near the end of the process. But he was important throughout the whole story. So I was writing out of sequence, and I had to tell my copy editor, I'm really afraid that I have introduced him twice. And I was writing that in Pages and sending it in Word. Since then, I moved to Scrivener, and I realized what I could have done is just simultaneously opened up chapter 7 and chapter 30 and had them side by side and seen how did I intro him at these times for it? How did I do the exit of stuff in fiction as well? That ability to just concentrate on only the thing you want to see right now. I was talking with somebody recently who said they didn't like Scrivener because they preferred how in Word you can easily move chapters around. And I gasped.
Yeah.
Because in Word,
I'm a little shocked at that too.
Yes. Yeah. So I showed them, just drag. There you go. Or put it into the corkboard mode, which I don't use, but others do, and just move the card around and things like that. I think it's another thing where the tool is there, it just wasn't seen. So there's a learning curve to it. But I prefer we're getting on with things but I also play when I'm trying not to actually write, when I want to distract myself. And so in the end, I tell myself in the end, I get the benefit because I find these obscure features and they help me. But Scrivener shocked me recently, but it's at least 6 years since it's been updated. And yet you use it now and it seems perfectly new and modern. And then something like Word seems to age really quickly. Don't know
Yeah.
why.
Well, Scrivener, I'm glad you brought it up because we haven't talked about it in the show in a long time, but it was one of the very first app focused shows we did on Mac Power Users, like episode 10,
Oh, right.
but way back in the day. I love the research. You really nailed it there with the research thing. When I was doing law, right, I wrote a lot of very intensive briefings and motions for the court. And Scrivener was also perfect for that. I know it was really developed as a creative writing tool, but for legal writing, because you get all these PDFs of cases and research and law review articles and all the research you do in order to write this brief. Well, it's all right there. And if the way I would set it up is the right side of the screen was basically my research and the left side were my words. And it just made it so easy to get the job done. Just see your research, to jump between different sections of the brief. And if this works here and there, you could do them both at the same time. And it really is a powerful writing tool. I know a lot of people use it to write all sorts of research-based material, whether it be an episode of Doctor Who or a PhD thesis,
I was thinking about you, and recently you were talking about a dictation app you use on your watch. And it just reminded me of things you said before. Maybe this is a lawyer thing. I've had the impression from you that you see written text as being spoken text transcribed. And I presume it's because in law, everything has to be really clear and proper. Whereas in my case, I'm writing characters who are lying and characters who don't know what they're thinking and things. So I find written text very different to dictation. I don't enjoy it remotely as much as you, but I wonder if that's just the form we want it to end up in rather than the tools we use to get there.
Well, I think for me, like when I was a baby lawyer, the very first day, the senior guy walked in and handed me a tape recorder and said, you have to learn how to use this if you're going to survive, because they want you to output so much. And back in those days, there was a person in the office that transcribed those tapes. You gave the tape to them and you got it back in a day or two. And so that was a skill you had to master.
I'm embarrassed to admit how recent this is. It's about 3 years ago. Now, I used to transcribe all of my interviews by hand. I had an app called, I think it was just called Transcription, that really just played the audio and let you skip back half a second to check words and things. But I would slog through this, and I got hired to write 20 articles in a particular thing, very similar articles with it. I interviewed 8 or 9 people, somebody else interviewed the rest, sent me the tapes, and I'm going through this, and I've got up to about number 10, and I can't take it anymore. Just the sheer slog of going through all of this and backtracking half a second to check a technical word, so then you'd have to look it up. I just walked away for a bit. I did not have time to stop, but I walked away and I searched, and I found it would have been otter.ai then, and from that day to this, I've used different tools, but I have never transcribed by hand. And also I finished the remaining 8 or 10 or whatever it was of that project in half the time I'd spent doing the first bit. Did not tell the client. Hope she isn't listening. Yeah.
Well, I do think that's one of the things where AI is actually beneficial now is the transcription of audio to written text is way better than it used to be because of that. Yeah. And just to kind of finish the story, now I don't write legal briefs, but I do write a lot. And I find that when I start with a dictation layer at the beginning, the final product is more conversational from me.
Oh, right.
And
right.
I kind of like that for my writing as Max Sparky. If I was writing character dialogue, there's no way I would be able to do it with dictation. So I get where you're coming from. But I actually, for my current type of writing, that first really ugly dictated version is a nice start for me, but it does go through a lot of edits after that.
The real reason I started the 58 Keys series was that I identified as a scriptwriter and I wasn't getting enough script writing done, or jobs, I wasn't getting enough practice. So I script every one of them. And after a couple of years of this now, I am really good at writing my own dialogue. Rubbish at anybody else's, but I've got me nailed completely. I've got my voice down, and I really obsessively love gorgeous dialogue. So I tend to write even non-fiction work, even meant to be relatively straight, there will be automatically a dialogue-y, conversation-y tone to it. I think I just made up a word there, dialogue-y. We're allowed.
Hey, why not? Totally unrelated. Because you are a lover of the written word, what's a recent piece of media people listening should check out for good dialogue, whether it be a television program or a movie or something, or even a book? Give us one.
I read a script every day. I mean, I've read scripts all my life. But in 2017, I read a blog suggesting it'd be a good idea to do one every day. Why not? You're a writer. Try it for a year. And I've never stopped. And I read at least one. I read about 600 a year. But there's one particular site on the web called TV Writing that manages to get the odd episode of something really good. And recently, it got the first and the last episode of Lessons in Chemistry, the Apple TV Plus show. And that last episode in particular, on the page, it made me cry. It's just utterly fantastic writing, I think. And so, I'm reading the book now, but because really upsetting things happen in the story and they're getting closer and closer in the book, I'm finding myself putting the book down further and further. But on the page, the scripts and the book as well. I just last night finished Richard Osman's new book, We Solve Murders. And there's a strange phrase in the UK, I don't think it's in America, called cozy crime, which is very gentle crime. I mean, there might be murders in it, but it's I think of them as comeuppance stories. The baddies are always sorted out in the end.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I get that.
And strictly speaking, he writes that, but I think he has much more of an edge to it, and it's much funnier, and the stakes are much higher. I mean, without them being ludicrously over the top, the reason you finish his books is you have got to know that everybody's okay by the end. You really pull through. And I think his style, because Richard Osman's a very familiar figure on TV here in the UK, you can see him reading the story to you, and it's in his voice, it's in his tone. And I love how he conveys that through the words he uses and the words he doesn't use. So there you go. That'd be two.
That idea of cozy crime, I really enjoyed years ago reading a whole series of books called the Brother Cadfael books.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
Yeah, it was like set in the Middle Ages, and there's this monk, and he's returned from the wars, and he's kind of wise and practical, and whenever there's a murder or something, the church sends Brother Cadfael to sort it out. And it's very much cozy crime. He always outwits the bad guy, and it's just kind of fun to read them. Similar and good dialogue.
A diluted version of The Name of the Rose, but I don't mean that in a critical way. Yeah. It's very absorbing anyway, but like stuff. Yeah. My mind's just gone to the fact that BBC recently put out, I can't think of the number of it, a couple of hundred Doctor Who scripts online, and I know there's more coming in the next few months. So I read all of them that are on there. And some of them, that dialogue is just astoundingly deep. I mean, we mentioned that I write Doctor Who. I wrote Doctor Who radio dramas, and I'm very proud of that. And it's a highlight of my career. But you read these scripts, and they have found a depth to the Doctor that is so rich. And I would never have got that far. I kind of concentrate on the other characters, took the Doctor as given, and they really go in deep on this thing. And it's... I read it and I'm engrossed and deeply upset that I'm not that good a writer, but doesn't mean I won't keep trying. Yeah,
as we all do. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/MPU for the leading integrated cloud-based software suite. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Some will say rates will rise or fall. Others may say inflation is up or down. The only way business owners can know for sure is if someone invents a crystal ball. Until then, over 38,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. Business today is complicated. There's lots of sources of revenue. There's lots of expenses. There's lots of things to keep track of. If you can put that all in one place, giving you one single source of truth, your forecasts and actionable data will be right there for you to help you make the right decision moving forward. Essentially, NetSuite is a great opportunity to future-proof your business and get clarity by having a single source of truth. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/MPU. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/MPU. That URL one last time is netsuite.com/MPU. And our thanks to NetSuite for their support of the Mac Power users and Olive Relay. All right, William, in addition to doing all your writing, I know you also use your Mac and your Apple devices to get through the day. I mean, you run the Writers Guild. Every time I talk to you, you're like doing another thing. What are the tools and apps that you use to get all that done?
I bow down in front of OmniFocus.
Okay.
I may have said this last time I was on because I remember I tried it just about the same time I was kicked out of the BBC. That sounds more dramatic than it really was, but let's go with drama. Kicked out of the BBC, and suddenly I went from having I was in 4 different parts of BBC at the same time as a freelancer. So I had something like 6 editors, 4 jobs, all that stuff. I went to nothing and then had to build up the freelance writing again. And after about a month or so, I'd got about 20 clients in various stages. And my wife, Angela, said to me that I actually seemed lighter. And it is because I'd just gone into OmniFocus and it was like I knew everything was being handled. I wasn't going to drop anything. And so that's continued 12, 13 years on. I read something you wrote once again that I thought was particularly good and I've completely ignored, which is this idea that you look at OmniFocus first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And I know you're right. And there's not a hope. It's been on my screen every minute for all of those 12 years.
Okay.
I'm not changing.
Yeah. Well, so long as you don't spend your time reorganizing the deck chairs, it's okay. But that is a danger if you keep it open all day. Is you have the perfect task database, but you're not actually doing the tasks.
Yeah, I know. I'm a bit guilty of that. And occasionally I fall off the wagon and getting back on it is quite hard, particularly when just in the last few weeks, I mean, I mentioned what I was doing today with things that just by chance, a lot of work has come to kind of not deadlines, but peak points of it more or less around the same time. So being able to look at OmniFocus and think, I'm only looking at the Writers Guild, I'm only looking at the National Association of Writers in Education stuff, I find that quite cleansing, and that's how I get on with things for it. So everything goes through OmniFocus, and then most things, so I'm a bit surprised to say this, most things go through Omni Outliner, and I'm surprised because I don't tend to like outlines, but Omni Outliner is great for just, I've got these 2 ideas, chuck them down. I was in discussions to write for a TV show and it didn't work out, but they said to me as part of the process, keep sending in ideas for it. And I said, yes, of course, because ideas, fine, easy, and this is what I want to do. Yeah. But then they said, yeah, but an idea has to be about 1,200 words. And I think I delivered 30 of them. I'm not sure now. It's quite a lot. But it would get to a stage where I'd think of a single thing. I'd pop it in Omni Outliner. And then the next day I'd look at it and think, right, well, what's the most dramatic thing that can lead to that? What's the worst thing that can happen afterwards? And then what's the worst thing after that? But I'd get to about 10 things. That'll do. Wrote it up, sent it in. Never thought about it again. And I think maybe 3/4 of the ideas were utter junk. But a couple of them are really good, and I've used them in other things since. So Omni Outliner is an ideas grower, I think. So,
yes. Absolutely. It's we talk a lot about mind maps and outlines, and I think for like the type of work you do, outline makes more sense because it's linear. The story has to have,
Wow.
a linear
Yes.
progression. So why not figure it out while you're doing that?
I do spend a lot of time thinking about sequences and structures and the bridge between things and I mean, usually when you've got a story idea, I'm working on a novel now where there is a particular key moment that I think will make you gasp if I can get it to you at just the right spot. And I'm nowhere near there yet. So just trying to work towards it. That one I actually am trying to plan because there are like these key tentpole things in it. But yeah, I'm usually more of a pantser, see what happens and throw things away. But after throwing away 250,000 words, I might be reconsidering this process a little bit more.
It occurs to me, William, that you're like my daughter. She's a playwright. She just got her degree, so she's
Just
new in her
and
career.
had a show in Edinburgh.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, on
She
the
did.
Fringe, fantastic success.
But
Yes,
but the thing is, now watching TV and movies with her is unbearable because she can unwind a plot in the first 2 minutes. She'll know
right.
what's going to happen. I bet you're the same. It's like if she's got the power to spoil it for you in the first couple minutes.
And she uses that power.
She's doing it less now, but now I look at her, because I told her to stop doing that, but I look at her and I know that inside she's already figured it out. And it drives me a little batty that she's so fast at that stuff.
There's I can remember the author name, but I probably shouldn't say it. I was quite ill in the theatre once, whatever reason, just a cold, and it all went wrong. And I had to leave 10 minutes in. I actually, forgive me for this, I went outside the theatre and I threw up on the street outside.
Oh, no.
And then when whoever I was with joined me after the play, and I told them the rest of the plot. So, yeah, I did a bit of that. I'm kind of with your daughter.
Yeah.
There, and I feel guilty.
Well, you're a
But usually
professional.
I think, well, yeah, I never watch anything to analyze it. I mean, I'm thinking you hear sometimes people talking about the special effects in a film. And I think if you stop to say, oh, the CGI was really good in that moment, you're wrong because it took you out of the story.
Yeah.
Anything that keeps me in. Like, I think I have favorite films, like people keep telling me Back to the Future has ludicrous plot holes, but it carries you through it so well. I'm sure, I mean, I have read the script. If I reread it, I could see them. But the journey and the characters, I just want to be taken somewhere with it. I'm not sitting there analysing it unless I'm suddenly thrown out. Like there's this ITV drama quite recently here, which was remarkable in every way, except every time a new character was introduced, it was so clunky and leaden. It was practically... hello, my brother-in-law of 7 years.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Every time. That's it. I was out. And it was a real effort to get back in. And yet it was a hugely successful piece, far better written than I could have done. Just that one flaw tripped me up. And you don't seek out these things, but it happens.
Well, it sounds like you're in pretty deep with the Omni group. You've got Omni Focus and Omni Outliner as you develop.
OmniPlan as well.
Oh, really?
I used to use OmniPlan as a joke. I had this job once where I didn't want to do whatever it was, and this whole group of us, I just thought, this is not going to happen. So I front-loaded it, whole plan with their jobs, and put mine at the rest, thinking they will never get to my stage. And all these years later, they never have. So I enjoyed it for that. But more recently, the stuff with I keep saying NAWE, the National Association of Writers in Education. I'm their publications manager now, which means editing and producing 3 issues of one magazine, producing an academic journal to the fourth, and various other bits and pieces. And I inherited lots. And I came in, they had all their schedules. So just so that I could understand where I could fit in, I did this massive OmniPlan thing, and it was brilliant. Gantt charts, I got so into it, and it's genuinely been a tool. So actually, it's only OmniGraphor that I don't even remotely understand. But
yeah, I don't know why it is. Gantt charts like warm the cockles of my heart. I love seeing projects laid out on a beautiful Gantt chart. Even though when they don't always follow the plan, it does feel pretty good when you put it together.
Yes, you feel like you understand it more. You haven't done anything in a way, but it's all there, and I feel more in control. And I was slightly overwhelmed at the start of that job, and then after doing all that, I felt like, yeah, just do this and this. Plus, you're working with great people, so they will carry you along when you blow it up by accident.
one of the things I was thinking about in your life is it's interesting because you're a writer, and so often writers are kind of monks, right? You
Mm.
really hunker down, you get the play, the script, whatever written, and you kind of close out the world. But you also are the head of the union in essence, and you're involved with all these other educational and other products. I
Yeah.
know just from our personal acquaintance that you're a busy guy. So you've got to have a lot of email and communications coming in that you've got to keep up with at the same time that you're supposed to be a writing monk. How do you balance that?
I'm a rubbish writer. That solves it all.
That's not true. That's not true.
I should say with the guilds, I'm deputy chair, so I mean, there's all sorts of officers there. I would argue that I am actually the least of all of us there because I've never personally been involved in any of the negotiations that go on with TV companies and film studios and things like that. So I think I have the easiest job of them all. I just support whatever goes on. The rest of it going to education stuff, the young writers. I think the young writer stuff I do, I genuinely worry about my writing because there's like 20 of us who do these groups, and occasionally I'll assist one of the other writers, and they're so good and they get the kids to write so well. And I think my writers have a good time, but I wonder whether or not I get them to write as well as some of their other writers do. So occasionally when we cross over, I'm really glad to see my writers getting exposed to other types of writers. Right. Although actually, I cannot get over how exciting it is to have a young writer like 10 or 12 years old who will not do what you ask them to do because they've got a better idea and they go do it and they're right. And it's just thrilling to see them totally freed to write what they want. And I'm there getting to watch them do it. It's incredibly rewarding. And then I come back to my desk and I'll be here for 15 hours a day, and I relish that time writing. So I always say that I truly do not believe in luck. You make things happen. But right now, just now, things are working very well. I mean, I'm freelance, so there have been some horrible patches in the past, but right now, I just need to get certain projects further on, and then I'll be happy.
How do you deal with like email though? I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of it.
Well, I feel like I get a lot. I was talking to somebody who complained, they were a teacher, and they said that by the time they got home, they had 3 emails waiting for them. And I tried not to laugh. I mean, do I get 100 a day? I'd be surprised if it's as many as that. And they tend to come in big lumps, though. So I try to set aside time. I have it on OmniFocusing actually, of clear the main inbox every day. It doesn't mean reply to everything. It means if I can reply, yes. If it's something that has to take some time, it goes into OmniFocus, but I at least deal with it all so that I'm not looking at the inbox. Excuse me, I'm not looking at any one message twice in the inbox. I've worked with people where we've had to share inboxes, and it's just bewildering trying to work out who's answered what and who hasn't. So you just clear through it as much as you can. And then I have an advantage that I'm a very fast typist and I'm extremely fast reader, but I have the disadvantage that I love emails. So if you write to me, I have an awful habit of writing back instantly. I mean, I've had people saying they hadn't noticed they hit the send button and there's a reply from me right away. So it's a bad habit, but email is just brilliant. I mean, it's text. The way I communicate, the way I think is through text. So I don't think about it enough to measure it. I get conscious sometimes that I feel a bit overwhelmed by what's left to do, but then you dive in and it's such a pleasure. Well, most of it's such a pleasure. I do have the odd automatic reply for some things. I think you do that, don't you? You have lots of text expander snippets. I've only got a couple.
Yeah,
is that what you do?
I've got a few, not as many as I used to. I mean, I recently hired somebody to help out with some of the stuff that requires repetitive entry. Because like for years, I tried to solve the problem with automation of email, and it really didn't work for me. Because like if somebody has a problem with like a labs membership or something, it's much better to have a human get to the bottom of it than automated text.
Yeah.
So I have JF helps me out with that. And he does a better job than any script. But you just got to kind of pick and choose your battles. I do, though, think that point you made is worth emphasizing, that you look at things once. And I think if you have a lot of email, one of the best things you can do for yourself is come up with some system to categorize it, whether it is put
Yeah.
it in OmniFocus and tag it to projects, or put it in individual mail folders or whatever. Addressing email when you do all of one kind of email at a time is so much faster than going through an inbox where you have to have your brain jump from different areas of
Yes.
your life with each email.
I quite envy the fact that you can compartmentalize like that. Mine tend to be very bitty. I have, just looking at it now, 4 inboxes. I don't like to run all the inboxes together. I like to have, there's the Writers Guild one. I will go into that to deal with it.
Yeah.
But beyond that, things are very. I have this one inbox, which is just. It's the email address I give out if I'm not sure about anybody, or it's the email address I put out online, and it gets filled with things. And then, of course, as soon as I reply to somebody, I accidentally reply from my main email address, and then we're off filling up that box as well. But yeah, people are so funny on emails. It's a joy of the job, I think. But that might just be me.
For me, it depends. Like I really like hearing from like listeners and readers, so long as it's something that I can reply to and get an answer to quick. Sometimes people write me and they're like, well, I'm having this problem with my network. What do you think? And it's like, that I just can't scale that. I don't have enough time to fix everybody's network problem. And that's the hard part of it for me. But I do think for me, categorizing it made such a huge difference. And even though it takes a little bit of time to sort them as they come in, it just means that I'm going to do a much better job of replying to them later.
I have been wondering about the mail prioritization. I stumbled in the middle of that word. That's coming in, or is here. I'm not sure now, with iOS 18 and the rest. Yeah. Right. I get really confused over what is and isn't here, because I'm using beta this, beta that. I don't know. At first I thought, well, that's very nice. I'm sure loads of people will love it, but it wouldn't be right for me. But then I can't remember the last time I moved iPhones. There was a patch where, when you want to move a message into inbox, and iOS will say, well, the last one like this, you moved into this one.
Yeah.
And it stopped doing that for a bit, and I found I really missed it. So when it slowly relearned its database or whatever, so I find I use that a lot. Maybe I'll use this too. I don't know, there's something I feel like I want to do on my own email instead of having iOS or Gmail or one of these sorted out for me. So I don't know.
No, not me, man. I pay SaneBox. I mean, they're a sponsor too, but I pay for my account, and they sort my email for me, and it does a lot of that for me. And man, if that went away, I would be very sad because, that's just one less thing I have to do, and it's kind of nice.
I cannot tell you the name of this company. It's to do with the email company. I suppose it's not dissimilar to SaneBox. If you know what SaneBox does with sorting emails, it was a company that does that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a bunch
they
of
wanted
them.
me. Yeah, they wanted me to do some sort of partnership with 58 Keys and them. And I said, well, yes, but I'm not looking for sponsors. What can we talk about? And it got so strange. I eventually realized they were not reading my email replies. And I just thought that was so funny, given what they were doing for it. So in the end, it got to this. I actually said to them, no, enough. We're not doing this. Goodbye. 2 days later, they came on and so are we going to do this or not? And they didn't even read that one for it. So
that's funny.
If it works, it's a great tool, I think. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I do think, and so we're going to get that for free with an update to mail. It's probably not going to be as extensive as SaneBox, but I think for a lot of people, it'll be nice. And I'll be curious to see if you experiment with that, because there is some advantage to having, the robot. There are certain things the robots are good at. And I think categorizing email could be one of them.
I worry sometimes that I don't give myself enough time to just play. I mean, I mentioned earlier about doing this and finding bits in Scrivener and things, but recently, just in the last few weeks, things have been quite tight for time. And I know that, for example, I had this gap where I knew if I spent some time and made a shortcut, it would solve a big problem throughout the week. And I did spend the time, but then the shortcut fell over. And I haven't had time to go back and play with what's going on. I think I might get all of these iOS 18 features and not get around to using them until iOS 19
Yeah.
comes along. So.
I have a block. I guess I can justify this based on my job these days, but I call it a research block. And I do at least one of them a week. And I just have a list of things I'd like to try out or fix or whatever. And I really enjoy that research block. It's really fun for me to go through. But the trick is, the problem I was having was I would go off on a red herring when I should be doing my work. You think, oh, I would really like to try out that feature or that app or whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just toss aside everything I was supposed to do today and spend an hour and a half on this. That's bad. So I just add it to the research list, and that gives my brain a hook to say, okay, well, that's out there for you one day. And then I block some time for it every week. And I've got a lot of good ideas and content from, going down those rabbit holes. But you're right. You have to give it a space. You can't just do it in the moment or just not make time for it, or you'll just never do it.
Mind you, I find I learn things more because I need them to do something rather than sit down to study it. So recently I did a conference program for a company for the first time, and it was in Affinity Publisher. I love Affinity Publisher, but I had to learn how to do tables in there. And because there was no time to learn it, I learned it that much faster. So I'm arguing both sides here. I enjoy the fact that I can make software do what I need, but I'd like the idea you practically give yourself permission to try things out. I need to do that. Do you mind if I ask how long a research block you give yourself?
An hour or two.
Amount of time.
An hour or two. It's usually Thursday afternoon for me. By then I'm kind of cooked from the week, and Fridays I spend all day Friday usually working on field guides. So it's kind of like my little dessert at the end of Thursday.
Nice. Very hard, isn't it, when you first go freelance? Because, I mean, it's quite a while now since you left the law, but you've basically had to structure your whole week around it. Nobody was really imposing things on you. And I remember finding that very hard.
Well, I mean, I didn't have control of my schedule for 25 years. And then suddenly I did. And that's an adjustment. That's a good adjustment.
You started being a lawyer when you were 5 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, actually, really, I was thinking I lost control of my own schedule in 1992. So however long that was, so it was a few years.
I went freelance in 1993. That was the time to make a big change then.
You and me both, brother.
Early 90s.
You and me both.
Do you mind if I ask, do you miss the law?
Not a bit. Not a bit. I mean,
right.
It's weird because I really enjoyed helping people as a lawyer, and I feel like I did a good job of it. But I had been doing it 30 years, and I think it was time for a change.
Right.
I missed the money; that was great. But but it just I needed a change. I had a friend call me recently who's a fancy lawyer, and he was telling me that he was listening to a podcast with a bunch of retired these billionaire Silicon Valley types now make podcasts to talk about whatever they're doing. And he says, I realize that you're living the life of a retired billionaire. And I said, you're kind of right. I mean, I don't have the billions, but I really enjoy what I do. And I like to think that I help people. And it's a good way to spend your years. So it is weird, but it's not that I'm angry at the law or whatever. I'm glad I was a lawyer, but I don't miss it.
Right. You've done your time. You did your work.
Yeah.
And now you're doing all of this. So, yeah.
And I could go off on a whole tangent here, but I will say that when I retired from the law, I heard from many people that are very successful around 30 years of what they had been doing who are also ready to change. And I think that's something about the human condition, that you can only do something so long before you need to try something else.
Right. That's worrying. I must be coming up to 30 years of writing. Now, I'm going to prove you wrong in this particular case.
I think you're a little different. I mean, but I'm talking about people who are like partners in law firms, surgeons, people who have these, these jobs that take a toll, after 30 years. I think sometimes you're done. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Backblaze. Backup today with unlimited cloud backup for Mac OS and Windows. Try it today for free. Just go to the link in the show notes. I'm so pleased to have Backblaze as a Mac Power User sponsor. I have been a happy and loyal customer for years. Backblaze is the folks looking after your digital data with their unlimited computer backup for Mac OS and Windows for just $99 a year. So you can protect all your data automatically without even having to think about it. And it's not just for personal use either. Backblaze is great for businesses. You can protect a whole team's data through a centrally managed administrative console. It's easy to deploy across multiple workstations and silent and link-based deployment options. And the Enterprise Control add-on includes granular access permissions, advanced single sign-on options, group management controls, and compliance support. You're in safe hands with Backblaze. They really know their stuff. They're recommended by the New York Times, Inc. Magazine, Macworld, PC World, LifeWire, Wired, Tom's Guide, 9 to 5 Mac, and more. And you can access your backed up data from anywhere in the world using their web app or their iOS and Android apps. That's a super handy feature. Like I said, I've been using Backblaze for years. When I sent my kids off to college, one of the first things I did was put Backblaze accounts on their computers because I knew they'd be in college and they'd never be backing up their data, but Backblaze would be doing it for them. Stephen and I have been talking for years about backups, and a key component to a good backup system is an offsite backup, and with a Backblaze account, you just have that handled. Backblaze offers multiple restore options, including rapid recovery via USB hard drives, shipped to you in the event of data loss or ransomware, or go old school and restore by mail. For a refundable fee, a hard drive with all your data is shipped directly to your door. Go check out backblaze.com/MPU so they know where you came from and continue their support. They've restored over 55 billion files for their customers. Don't be that person that forgot to back up their important files. Receive a fully featured, no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/MPU. Go there, check it out, and start protecting yourself from a data disaster. Don't put it off. Start today. And our thanks to Backblaze for their support of the Mac Power Users and Olive Relay. William, I always like to close out these interviews just asking to put a spotlight on a couple apps or services that you like that maybe nobody's heard of before. Or maybe they have heard of them, but you particularly like them.
I am a regular listener, so I knew you were doing this. At the moment you asked, I thought, this is my chance to talk about an app called HB Clock. I think a long time ago it was called OB Clock, and I don't know why it changed the name. And I thought, that's it. I love this thing. Got to tell everybody. And it's died. You cannot get it anymore. It's on my screen right now. It's a clock, an analog clock. Because I have such a wide monitor, the usual Mac clock, it's way, way over there in the next zip code kind of thing. So I have a nice big clock next to me. It reminds me of the very first days of Mac OS X when they had that floating clock. I think their clock was like the Swiss railway clock or something famous, but it's like that kind of size for it. And I've used it for years, chuck it on in the middle of running a workshop or something, and there it is just in my eye line, tell me the times. And I was going to rush to you, and I looked up the links, and it's no more.
I also have an analog clock on my desktop. I do it via the clock widget. You can put a clock widget on and pick analog or digital, and maybe it's a sign of my age that I prefer the analog clock.
Right. I like the size of it. Oh, well, maybe that's my age then. Okay. Yes. Well, this is getting depressing soon. Let's go totally the other way. An app that's not only available, it's brand new. Have you had a chance to try out the new version of Reader yet? EE Reader.
Yeah.
I think I like it a lot. A couple of bits I'm kind of missing, but I've been a Reader fan for years. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've kind of been slowly moving away and reading more Apple News Plus instead. But now I'm finding it's just when I want to read like a Sunday afternoon magazine almost, I can go into the new Reader and there's all this stuff waiting for me. So not just text, it now also does YouTube videos and things. So as long as I don't allow it to have too many YouTube feeds in there, it's like a nice little relaxing break to go there. So Reader app, I subscribed instantly as soon as it went subscription. So that's a happy one.
Yeah, Reader with 2 E's. It's one of the top RSS applications, and that has evolved so much over the years. Now he's got it built so like it can also be your read it later service. He like will manage that for you, or you can work with any of the third party read it later services. And it's always had a very minimalistic design, but attractive design.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people love that one. And it is a good looking app. And they just came out with a new version. So
totally revamped.
yeah, that's at readerapp.com. 15 years. Yeah. Wow. Has it been 15 years?
Really? Is it that long? Yeah. That means I've been using it for 15 years. I remember moving over to it.
Yeah.
When, good grief, where the time goes.
The other thing I like about Reader with the two E's is the processing stuff out of it is so easy. Like I do a weekly, in the Max Marketing Labs, I do a weekly like 10-minute podcast where it's just like a summary of the news of the week. I feel like a lot of people in the labs don't keep up with all the Apple news. So I just try to make like a short, like 10 minutes or ish podcast, and it goes out every Friday. And one of the ways I capture ideas is when I read news articles that I'm like, oh, this would be good. And I save them to Apple's Reader service, but I do it in the Reader app. You just swipe over and it's in. It's like so fast. So it's also, in addition to being pretty, it's very efficient.
I think the old version of Reader was more suited to that than the new version, but both versions are continuing. The old one's been renamed Reader Classic, and I'm finding one thing with the new version is it doesn't keep track of unread counts or things, and you can't say just I've finished with all of these, kill them. It just remembers where you got to last and presents the latest one. Whereas the old one, I could say all of these are gone now, get them out of the way.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping them both around, one for research, one for just sheer pleasure of reading.
And then because you mentioned earlier that you're publishing a magazine now. Explain that.
It's the education one, National Association of Writers in Education. Again, I've taken over as their publications manager. Actually, I've just delivered the 4th issue today. So that would be just over a year with them. Very academic journal, except I'm not academic. So I've kind of introduced some new writers to it that I think are not non-academic, but I'm trying to get a nice balance and things. And there's also, because publications manager is more of a production job than an editing one, I'm happy telling you that I increased the readership. It was just under 10-fold between the issue before me and my first issue. And most of it was just in working out how to get rid of the barriers. Once somebody wanted to read, they had to go through quite a few steps of logging in things. And I found a quicker way to get rid of some of that. And the result, the readership was dramatic for it. So I feel like I've done some good there, and I enjoyed that. And some of these articles, we have this nice running feature now I introduced called Goes Wrong. Somebody talks about a lecture, a classroom, a workshop that went horribly wrong. Preferably it was their fault. And so they get to write cathartically about what happened and also what lessons they've learned since. In fact, I wrote the first one. I was talking about a bad school visit and why it was wrong and how that's changed what I do next and things. So I'm finding, rather than straight academic research topics, talking more about writers in education instead of writing in education. I think it's becoming a good read, although I also feel like I've only just started on it. So the new issue is very good.
And you're doing all that in Affinity Publisher, right?
Yes. Planning it in Numbers, would you believe? I don't know why Numbers are not on the outliner, but I plan out deliveries in Numbers. There's an Omni plan for every issue now, and everything gets edited through Pages first. I use Pixelmator Pro for all of the images, but the final assembly and a lot of last-minute editing is done in Affinity Publisher, which I think is just a gorgeous piece of work. I love that. I love that we have these tools that you can genuinely love. This is not just a tool to get something done. You can relish being in it. And every now and again, like when I had to learn how to do tables, and you see how well they've done tables on it. And I was able to produce this gorgeous grid of a schedule for a conference. And I come away feeling very proud of myself. I've done that. It looks great. And the truth is, it's Affinity Publisher that's done it. But yeah, it's just, well, I get excited by this.
There's a little bit of you in there too.
Well, I typed it. We'll say that. Okay.
Well, William Gallagher, a man of many talents, writer, Apple Insider podcast, 58 Keys YouTube series, a bunch of stuff you've got going on. We're going to put links to this in the show notes. But where should people go to learn more about you, William?
Well, I feel after saying that I love email, I should say email is good. WG@williamgallagher.com will get through to me and I will relish that. But I think at the moment, you can read a lot about me on Apple Insider, but also I think 58 Keys on YouTube is where I feel like it's you and me talking kind of thing. I like that one-to-one feel.
Yeah, I really like your YouTube channel and the informality of it, but the density of information. It's just really good. That's youtube.com/William Gallagher, Gallagher, called 58 Keys. You want to check that out. And we'll put links to all this in the show notes, gang. Thank you so much, William, for coming in today. What a great friend to have on the show when Steven's out. I'm so happy you were able to come in. Thank you to 1Password, NetSuite, and Backblaze, our sponsors this week. Hey, if you are a More Power User subscriber, that means you get the ad-free extended version of the show. Stick around. William and I are going to talk about AI and writing from his vantage point, and I'm looking forward to that. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.